We've all had a scrape, right? A graze from falling off a bike, a scratch from a branch. It seems like the most minor thing in the world. But what if I told you that in forensic science, that simple little scrape is actually a story, a super detailed story, a critical piece of a much bigger puzzle, written right there on the skin?
So, yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? What can it really tell us? You're probably thinking, come on, not much. It's just a surface wound after all. But in a medical legal investigation, that couldn't be further from the truth.
No, really. It can tell us pretty much everything, from the exact type of weapon used to the direction of an attack, and even, get this, the time the injury happened. An abrasion can lay out the basic facts of a case. It's kind of like a silent witness with a surprisingly loud voice. Okay, but before we can start cracking the case, we have to learn the language, right? We need to understand what an abrasion actually is, what's going on with the skin. This is where the real investigation begins. So, the key thing to get here is that an abrasion isn't just a simple cut. It needs two things to happen: pressure and movement. I want you to imagine skin being pushed down and dragged across a rough surface. That combination of force and friction is what scrapes off that very top layer of skin, the epidermis.
And, this is also why abrasions usually just kind of ooze instead of gushing blood. The epidermis itself, it doesn't really have its own blood supply. All the little blood vessels are hanging out in the layer below it, called the dermis. So for a straightforward abrasion, you're mostly just seeing clear fluid, or serum. Now, of course, if the friction is really bad, like what we call a brush abrasion, it can dig down into the dermis and cause more bleeding, but even then, it's usually just tiny vessels.
All right, so we've got the basics down. Now for the fun part, the real detective work. See, not all abrasions are created equal. Forensic investigators have sorted them into different types, and each one gives us a very specific, very different kind of clue. First up, we've got scratches. The official term is linear abrasions, and just like the name says, these are lines. They happen when something sharp or pointy gets dragged across the skin. And this could be anything: fingernails in a struggle, a thorn bush someone was pushed into, or even the tip of a weapon being used in a strange way. Next, let's talk about grazes, which are also called brush abrasions. These are what happen when a whole area of the body slides across a rough surface. This is the classic injury you'd see in, say, a traffic accident where someone was dragged along the pavement. It's a much wider, more extensive injury than just a simple scratch. And this is why grazes are so incredibly useful for an investigation. As the skin gets scraped, little tiny bits of it get peeled back and pile up at the very end of the wound. It's a tiny detail, but it points exactly in the direction the force was moving. Plus, the wound itself acts like a net, trapping all sorts of trace evidence, dirt, gravel, sand, that can actually link a victim to a specific place. Okay, this third type is, honestly, it's just incredible. It's called an imprint, or a patterned abrasion. So unlike the others that involve sliding, this one is caused by a direct, straight-on impact, almost like a stamp. The force literally crushes the top layer of skin and imprints the exact pattern of the object right onto it. It's a direct calling card from whatever object or weapon was used. Just look at these examples for a second to see how powerful this is. In a strangulation, you might actually see the weave of the rope on the neck. A hit-and-run victim could have the tread pattern from a car tire on their skin. Even a necklace can leave its mark. Or in a firearm situation, if the gun is pressed right against the skin, the recoil can leave a pattern. This is about as close as you can get to having a photograph of the weapon left right on the body. So we figured out the what and the how. But what about the when? Well, an abrasion can also act like a biological clock. We can use the body's own natural healing process to help investigators figure out a timeline of events. The way our bodies heal follows a surprisingly predictable schedule. When it's fresh, an abrasion is red and kind of moist. Within about a day, a scab starts to form. Then, over the next few days, that scab gets darker and darker, going from reddish-brown to almost black. It gets hard, and then it starts to shrink and flake off around the edges. So just by looking at what stage the wound is in, can give a really good estimate of when that injury actually happened. So now we have all these little clues, right? We have the type, the direction, the pattern, and the timing. The last step is to put it all together, to assemble all the evidence to build a clear, compelling story of what happened. And one of the most critical questions you have to answer is, did this happen before or after death? An antemortem injury, that's one that happened when the person was alive, will show what we call a vital reaction.
The body's systems respond. You get inflammation, bleeding, oozing, but a postmortem injury, none of that. It's just dry and hard, and it turns this brownish, parchment-like color because the body can't react anymore. Getting this right can be the difference between ruling a case a homicide versus an attempt to cover something up.
It all really comes down to this guiding principle in forensics, and it sums it up perfectly. Abrasions, though trivial injuries, should not be considered too insignificant to be ignored in medical legal investigations. To a trained eye, there is simply no such thing as an insignificant injury. So let's just recap the incredible story an abrasion can tell us. It pinpoints the exact site of impact. A patterned one can literally identify the weapon. Those little skin tags show us the direction of force. Its healing stage gives us a timeline. And, so importantly, it might be the only clue on the outside of the body pointing to a massive, maybe even fatal injury on the inside. When you put all that together, it's not just a wound. It's a full narrative of exactly what went down. So the next time you see a simple scrape, you'll know it's not just a wound. It's a language. It's a story written on skin, just waiting for someone who knows how to read it. The question is, now that you know the basics of this language, what stories are you going to see?